the chat right after, but otherwise, I'm very excited to kick off the conversation with Canhs. So start off by introducing him. He is a clinical social worker and therapist living and working in Seattle on the traditional land of the Duwamish people, past and present. Canhs provides decolonized, culturally affirming, and liberation-focused healing, and works with individuals and couples who are seeking healing from the impacts of trauma so that they can work towards individual and collective liberation. And as Jenny mentioned, we will be starting off with the discussion with Canhs, really around that topic of moving beyond the trauma of scarcity. And during this time, we'll unpack what trauma means, how it links to scarcity, and also hear some actionable steps that people can take towards that path of healing from trauma and also rejecting scarcity. And just very quickly before we really dive in, just some additional context that I shared in my email, but last year we did write this toolkit called Unlearning Scarcity and Cultivating Solidarity, really to examine how the scarcity mentality uniquely affects people of color, how we can approach solidarity as a way to unlearn the, us versus them mentality and really work towards change. And if people do have questions anytime during the discussion with Canhs, please just feel free to put it in the chat and Jenny and I will save them for the Q&A section. With that, I'd just like to kick off the conversation with Canhs. Canhs, can you just kind of help us walk through, unpack what trauma means, as well as kind of understanding what the long-lasting impact that trauma can have in our lives?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, just some introductions. It's really nice to virtually meet everyone. And I just want to take some time to kind of normalize, we're all on our own healing journey. So just kind of reiterating what Emily said, we only have 45 minutes. So we're going to do the best we can with what we have, but also it's okay to make mistakes. I don't want anyone to think like they have wrong or bad questions. And I hope that this is a continuation of more thoughtful dialogues that we have in the future. So I just wanted to say that before we started. Okay, what is trauma? So I just finished with a client, so I'm a little bit, but trauma is basically any experience or event or circumstance that is overwhelming. Overwhelming to the mind, body, spirit. So what that basically means is we are thinking about the holistic person, right? Trauma affects what you think, how you think, what you say to yourself. It's stuck in the body. It's stuck in our soul, spirit, whatever you want to say. And so using that example, trauma is pervasive in our society. So a lot of my clients think that trauma is something that happens to them, an assault, a rape, a violence, but it can also actually be you hearing or witnessing or experiencing it. So like reading the news, hearing about death, there's so much trauma in our society. And then because I'm a politicized healer, let's be real, society is traumatic. The systems that we live in are traumatic. So that's a basic understanding of trauma. And it affects the micro within us, in ourselves, where we work, where we live, where we pray, as well as the societal context of government, country, and more. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Canhs. I think that definitely kind of helps us better understand how you can think about trauma. I think oftentimes it's usually discussed a bit more one-dimensionally in some ways. So kind of really helpful to start off with that. And maybe just kind of extending it then to the idea of scarcity. How do you really see it then linking to scarcity, scarcity mentality as well?
So, what was that? So scarcity, absolutely. I mean, trauma relates to capitalism, specifically racialized capitalism. But in terms of scarcity, let's just not use big words. It's basically, there's not enough. There's limited resources. So under the system of capitalism, that is what is valued, competition. comparison, right? It's about certain people owning certain private goods at the expense of others. So that relates to trauma because they're both intertwined. You know, it is traumatic to be poor. It is traumatic to be a woman, a trans person, anything or anyone outside of the margins. And we'll speak about this later, but it cultivates a sense of scarcity of, I don't have enough and I want more and I want to look like this, but also I'm not enough. I don't think I'm a good person. So so scarcity and trauma brings up issues of shame. I'm bad, guilt, I did something bad. And it's really pervasive because, you know, we're always trying to strive for something more. So instead of being a human being, we are now being a human doing. We're constantly distracting ourselves. And so that's the trauma of scarcity, is we constantly want more. And so the question I always ask myself and clients is like, what is enough for you then? And I think that's a question that we can sit with for today's panel, right? Yeah, what is enough?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a great question to reflect on, and kind of also curious then, kind of in your experience then, how do you see these feelings that you've kind of already, you know, described really among the different relationships in your life, for example, personal, professional, among the communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like even today, to self-disclose, I want to be perfect. I'm like really nervous right now. Like, oh my God, I want to like be really profound, right? I want to use my brain and say these really fancy words, you know? So right now I'm embodying some of that scarcity based on my own identities, you know, growing up poor, like wanting, you know, internalized oppression, wanting to be professional or white, right? Wanting people to respect me. So that can show up in terms of worthiness. Worthiness is, I think about conditionality, you know, conditional love. If you, right, some people believe if I do this, if I look like this, if I have this job, then I will have this, then I will be lovable, then I will be enough. So it brings up issues of love and worthiness, right? And so we think about, how were you loved? How does society love? You know, bell hooks all about love. Love is radical, but in this country, in this culture, in this environment, love doesn't have to be radical, but it is, because we see so much violence and hurt and pain that's normalized and metabolized in our body. I see that with addiction, substance use, eating disorders, anything to distract from the feeling. So trauma fundamentally disconnects us from our bodies. It goes here. And that ties in with perfectionism. I want to be smart. I want to go to an Ivy League school. I want to be thin. I want to center what is normal. So substance use and addiction is a way to numb the overwhelming feelings. Codependencies, boundaries. I don't have needs. What are your needs? I don't know who I am. I, me is only in relation to our you. What do you want, mom? I'm scared of conflict. Let me appease you, fawning. And this is a huge thing for me as a Southeast Asian person, terrified of conflict growing up, right? Like, oh my God, what do I do? Fear of abandonment, thoughts. This is a huge one. The way that we think, binary thoughts, catastrophe labeling, I'm bad. Yes, no, I hate you, I love you. I'm only this. Hoarding, we saw that with COVID, and you know, gotta get more, but what is enough? How much money do you need to make in order to love yourself? Internalized depression, wanting to be white, wanting to be straight, wanting to be professional. And probably one of the biggest things I think everyone can empathize with here is, let's talk about work. If we're talking about capitalism, not taking vacation, wanting a promotion every 6 months, every year. If I get this raise, then I know that I did well. And if I don't sleep that much, then I'm okay. My identity is tied to my worth, and my worth is tied to my job, and my job is me. So that all this space is about work. So we never have time for love and relationships. That was a long rant. Sorry about that.
No, I definitely was like nodding to everything you were saying there. I do think as part of it, though, you do name all these, you know, feelings, but I think a challenge that I've discovered, and I think is true for a lot of other people, is that they aren't necessarily able to connect these, right? Or recognize why they feel that way, right? Or they act kind of to address maybe the surface level. So how do you encourage then, like the people you work with, for example, or even yourself, to be able to, just recognize these moments or these feelings and be able to kind of maybe take a step back and think about, what's really driving this?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and something that I'm also working on as during my work with clients. So I think one of the most important things to know is that scarcity, trauma, capitalism, racism, big systems, big words that we use, it disconnects us from our body. And not only does it value productivity and perfectionism, there's this huge myth in Western culture, specifically the USA, that we can do it alone. We don't need anybody. I don't have to go to therapy. I don't need to be in a relationship. I don't want to be vulnerable. So part of that work is understanding that you are complex and you are vulnerable and you can be strong. So humanizing yourself. So this sense of we are relational people, which is a fancy word for research has been done that we not only thrive in relationships, it's necessary for our psychological, mental, physical health. Like people deteriorate when they are lonely. So reframing relationships as vital and necessary. Like here, all of us, like I wish we could be together. This is what makes relationships this is what makes life so worthy, right? Esther Perel says the quality of our relationships dictate the quality of our lives. It's not technology. It's not Amazon Go. It's not getting a package. It's not buying a really nice thing. Think about the last time that you felt so calm or so peaceful or joyful. Who was that person? So relationships is one. And I think something that's really helpful is reframing everything as adaptive and survival. We choose to overeat, or we have substance use issues, or we push people away, or we have bad boundaries, because there are ways that we learn how to survive. So how could it be bad when we're just trying to survive under the system that's trying to stratify and put us in different boxes based on difference, right? So you're just trying to survive. So a great question I love to ask clients and myself is, that served you one time, didn't it? It worked for you. Does it work for you now? Is that what you want? I think some other things that can be helpful are simple. This is the last one. Is just get out. There's so many, but get out of your head. We live in this country. Our jobs are our life, and we're always in our heads. Dance. My partner has taught me so much. Dance, sing. Think about ancestral, cultural things. Go to church. Pray. Ride a bike, cook some food, be with people. Like the more we are in our heads, like I see this with clients and myself, I'm a very resistant client as a therapist, I'll be real, where I'm like, is this right? Do you like me? And I'm so in my head sometimes where I'm like, I'm healing, right? And she's just like, what? I'm just like, right, because you like me, because I want to be liked. So the more that I'm trying to fix myself in therapy, the more I distance myself in the therapeutic relationship. So get out of your head, like right now. You don't even need to take notes, just take it all in and notice what is happening in your body. So that's bullet point number 5 is be more embodied, which is a fancy word for, do you know that you have a body? Do you know that you feel your body has a story? Your brain is lovely and your body is constantly translating rich wisdom for you under the system that's traumatic.
Great. Yeah, I think those are all definitely ways that I think we can all start to try to incorporate that. I do think, maybe part of it, and I'm curious to hear from you if, as you go about this process with people, kind of maybe obstacles, like mental obstacles or barriers that people place, because I do think part of the process is, it takes a little bit for us to kind of absorb in what we hear from others. And I do think sometimes that we can be stopped at the point where we just place these barriers in place, right? And without maybe guidance or a certain way of thinking about it, sometimes it's a little difficult to kind of take that next step.
Yeah, can you ask me that question again?
Yeah, I think it was partly me just like thinking out loud, but the question was, as you are, encouraging people to think this way, or as you encourage the people you work with, do you hear of obstacles? Like what do people get stuck on as you're talking them through this?
Absolutely. Who here right now is dealing with scarcity or trauma or perfectionism or wanting control, and they're looking for me or the space for like what do I do, like for notes? I'm a wounded healer. I'm a therapist that has a hot mess. Anyone else? So just 3 people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, about half of you. The other half, you're secure. Don't go to therapy. You're good to go. All right. Some of the barriers would be exactly what I talked about, but let's take it bigger. What I'm talking about is micro. We can talk about, I don't know how to use this without using a big word, but there's something called racial triangulation, right? So we're talking about the system. So some of the barriers can be the place that we live in now, the society where it says Black versus white versus Asian versus Latinx versus Indigenous. And this is the example of moving from within us to the system, right? So that is one of the barriers that I work with, because I work with activists, I work with people of color, I work with a lot of women, first generation, refugees, immigrant, people out of the margins, right? And so that shows up as a barrier as, there's not enough for me in this society, however I identify racially, right? Because it has to be Black against white or Asian against white and that sort of thing. So how does that show up? That can show up with like anti-Blackness, right? That's something I'm working on, of like my own parents saying things like Black people are dangerous. And I've had to confront my own issues of that, of like colorism. So I didn't want to not have this conversation and leave without talking about the things that are actually happening right now. So those are some of the things, some of the barriers that come up of like colorism and anti-Blackness and gender-based violence is, how do I reconcile that in myself when I have areas of privilege and oppression without resorting to guilt and shame? Oh my God, like for example, I'll be really, really self-disclosing because that's how I do as a decolonized therapist. I work a lot with women, non-binary folks, and femme folks, and trans folks. And one of my biggest fears, because a lot of my work is trauma, sexual trauma, rape, incest, I get all the goodies, right? So I work with really heavy things. And a lot of these people are not, they're not men. And I'm obviously a cis man. So I'm really fearful of re-traumatizing my clients because I've had terrible experiences with men. So in my own journey, I've had to deal with like, you don't have to over-explain. This person has agency. So if they're working with you, that's okay, but you have so much shame and your fragility is coming out as a man. I'm like, right. As I'm not trying to cry, right. Or I grew up really poor and I'm not poor anymore, okay? I am doing okay, okay? And so I've had to reconcile with guilt and shame of, so that barrier is guilt and shame. Like, I didn't have this, I do have this. Or a client will be like, I'm the dominant majority, I'm white, I'm anti-racist, you're not, we have different identities, and that guilt shows up in shame. So those are some of the barriers. Other barriers can be, these surface kind of level relationships that we have with people. I think that's really important to bring up too, where we talk with people, but it comes from here, it doesn't come from the heart. And I think the last barrier, there's so many that I really want to bring up, is this idea, again, I'm going to be annoying, of perfectionism, of wanting answers. So many of my clients are like, what do I do? I've been seeing you for 2 years, it's not helpful. And I'm like, yeah, let's talk about that. Let's take a break, right? Let's find you another therapist. Let's talk about how like you want it now. And thinking about this beautiful Zora Neale Hurston quote, which is, there are years that have answers and there are years that have questions. So client, you have a lot of questions. I can't answer them for you right now. And I know you want them and you're taking out your notepad. That's a barrier. I want it now. I want to be fixed now. Even at work, right? It's like, I want that promotion now. Tell me how I can check off all these competencies so that you see me as competent, because I'm unable to do that for myself. So these are some of the barriers that I've seen within me and within my clients and throughout the world.
Definitely thanks for sharing that. I think I think you cover a few different like layers or levels to barriers. One of them in particular is kind of more around like what's going on in current day, right? And kind of at the heart of it structurally to capitalism, right? And what it's like for us to live and operate within kind of the framework of capitalism. So kind of going down that path a little bit, how do you think that we can really take care of ourselves? And I think part of the question is also, you stress collective and individual liberation, right? Like what can that look like, or how can we work towards that within this umbrella of capitalism right now?
Okay, so I'm going to speak less as we end so that we have more space for questions. So simply, it's a myth that we don't have enough. We are the wealthiest country in the world. I wasn't even born here. This place is disgustingly wealthy. So that is a myth that we have to operate under capitalism. It's a myth because of American exceptionalism and how this country was founded. But that's false. It's not real. There is so much wealth, and we don't have to live under this system. However, the reality is here we are. So some of these things that can be helpful are self-care. Now, I'm not talking about like take a bubble bath. I want you to think about self-care as who am I? What do I need? What do I want? Do you know the difference? And some of these tangible skills you can think about are when you take time off, are you really taking time off? Some people take a week off. They spend the first 3 days checking email. They spend the last day relaxing. They spend the last day on the plane checking email. Take time off and disconnect. Do not check your email. Understand under the system of capitalism that you are disposable, but you as a human are valuable. And two, we are relational people. Reach out to your people, right? Spend time with yourself and spend time with others. And then three, boundaries, but not just asking. But I really want each and every one of my clients that I work with to know their capital true self S. To show up in the world, to feel so confident in their skin that they know what they're worth. So an example is, clients pay me a fee, right? And I'll have some clients that are really traumatized that they avoid and they push people away. So they'll be like, well, I pay you $150 an hour and that's what you're worth. So you have to stay here and I'm going to scream at you because I paid you. And I don't do that. I don't play that. I go, you know what? That is not my value. I'm worth more than that. That's just what I need to survive. So that ain't gonna work. And they're shocked. They're like, no therapist. Well, I'm not like every other therapist. Boo, you cannot scream at me and tell me that I'm a fucking dumbass. It ain't gonna work. So I know my value in relationship to my work. Not all money is good money. So that's what I want people to understand. This is the reality we're under. Take some time off. You getting paid $100,000, it means nothing. My first job, I got paid $27,000 in New York City. I was making pennies. I make 6 figures now. That is a huge difference from someone growing up in Section 8, super poor on food stamps to where I'm at now. And I'm sharing this just to kind of normalize and humanize myself, right? This is not how I grew up. So I think that those are all some things that we can do, but the reality is that's the system we live under. And those are just some things that we can do kind of within the micro.
Yeah, and I think as part of that, something that you've really stressed throughout this conversation is the idea of, cultivating or forming deeper relationships. And I think there's a kind of important line there in terms of how can we then rely on our relationships, our community around us to be able to, whether it's recognize these moments and when we feel this way to actually like collectively working towards liberation. How do we do that? Because it can be uncomfortable to open up and to be vulnerable, right? So just ways that we can approach that.
Yeah, these are all things that I talked about in my sessions today. And I'm going to talk about my own therapy. Okay. Let's see. What a great question. I think again, it's understanding that hurt people hurt people. So humanizing yourself. So working on yourself. I don't think everyone needs to go to therapy, by the way, as a therapist. I know that's shocking, but work on yourself, read some books, go to your pastor if you're religious, talk to your people, go to therapy, but work on yourself. So instead of going outside, what do I do? What's the right way to heal? I messed up. Go inside and take out a mirror, a metaphorical mirror, look at it, get some Windex, and look at your reflection and figure out who you are. Because if you can be in a relationship with yourself in such a healthy way, you will be able to be in relation with another. And that is why I do the work that I do. If you can start healing yourself, you'll never be healed 100%. That's not possible. You will then be in a relationship with others, and that will transpire outside. I think also for a lot of the people of color I work with, also white people, everyone has a culture. Reconnect to your culture. Some of the people I work with, immigrants, they lose their language. I'm like, girl, like relearn your language, right? Watch some Korean dramas, okay? Like reconnect to your cultural heritage. Eat your food. This is so radical because we live in this country where people are like, what is that? Like I grew up in the 90s, right? And people are like, what is fish sauce? And now people fucking love pho, right? Pho and banh mi and all that. I'm like, please, y'all didn't like that. So reconnect to your culture, your values, okay? That's what I do. I be eating that kimchi at work. But also understand that this work is intersectional. We cannot be talking about anti-Asian without talking about Indigenous women being killed. We cannot, right? And we can't just talk about it. We have to do it. We have to educate ourselves. And this is the thing. Everyone has a different way of healing. So if you're not an activist, you don't want to go to march, read a book, talk to your family, right? Take a course, go to therapy, talk to your other white people. So I think that those are some ways that we can do that work in relation to ourselves and others.
Yeah, I think that is oh, really, really great there. And maybe just kind of as we think about transitioning to kind of opening it up too, do you have any kind of recommendations or advice in terms of where people can just start like right now?
Yeah, there's like, right, all these toolkits, right? There's so many things that you could read, but I would say start with yourself. If you don't go to therapy, if you don't have a healing practice, you do yoga, you walk, mindfulness, go inside, like reflection or meditation, whatever. So I call it a practice. Have a daily practice where you deeply reflect, you go inside, you take a breath, you close your eyes, and you just sit still and you look at that mirror and you understand the dark parts of yourself. Carl Jung calls this shadow work. You understand the dark parts of yourself. You understand the light parts of yourself. Don't run away from your shadow. We all have it. Once you're able to do that, talk to some other people, read a book. But if you read a book, you go to therapy, you check off something, and you're not reflecting, it ain't gonna work, boo. Obviously, this is how I verify it, right? But go inside, have a practice that's spiritual or cultural or meditating, and then go outside and seek out answers. Sit in the questions first and look at what your biases are.
I think it's part of that because these are all really continuous processes in some way that you really need to work on yourself, right? How do you approach the idea of accountability then, right? Accountability to yourself, to people around you. I think, accountability can be great in some ways, but if you aren't able to meet something, for example, then you can be really harsh on yourself, right? And I think that kind of feeds into the idea of perfectionism as well. So how do you just generally approach this concept of, holding yourself to these?
Self-compassion, which people will have a reaction to, but I'll explain what that means for me outside of a Eurocentric white way, not non-Christian death. Self-compassion and understanding and acceptance. Understanding and acceptance is validation. It does not mean you agree. with the action. Self-compassion is not take a bubble bath. Oh my God, treat yourself like a little kid. Self-compassion is you radically treat yourself in a way that's compassionate and mindful and human and complex. And you go, I'm gonna curse. I really fucked up. I sure did. And it hurts. Don't think, right? With the right apology. And I hurt here. And right now I could cry and my heart is aching. And I'm telling you this because I want to share, because I'm used to avoiding pain. I want to share this pain with you, not so you'll forgive me, but that I can tell you and be in relationship with you and you can do what you need to do. This takes everything I'm telling you, I do it for myself. It is not easy. It is difficult. I call this work with my clients, trauma work is not scary, terrifying, not tiring, exhausting, not difficult, humiliating, because you are going to be confronted with parts of you that you don't like. And I've done this work, which is why I feel very comfortable working with clients when they're like, well, what's the answer? I've been working with you for 2 years. Like, you have all the choice. You could find something, you could ghost me right now, but yet you're still seeing me. How interesting. The client is always in power. I'm like, you actually have power. You could leave me anytime. I'm here for you. And when you don't find it useful, you are welcome to go. So that's how I approach it. Validation and self-compassion.
And before we do really open up the floor, how do you just want people to feel leaving this? I know you've shared a lot of big ideas. Just kind of mentioned how it's, it's not difficult, humiliating, all these things. Like how do you really want people to kind of feel?
I want them to feel how I want all my clients to feel, how I want everyone to feel. The life that I have for myself is the life that I want for everyone else. So I want people to feel peace. I don't want you to feel happy. Happiness is fake. I want you to feel peace and calm so that when things are silent and you don't get validation, you love yourself and you're like, that's fine. I want people to have peace. I want people to be curious. Curiosity, my clients are probably annoyed at me, like, just be curious. I want you to be curious rather than judgmental and demanding. Wow, that really resonated with me. I wonder what I did not like what Canhs said. I don't like that. I wonder what that ignited in me. So those are the two things that I want people to feel, in addition to freedom and choice. So having more choices, because trauma takes away your choice. Do this, push people away. If you trust people, people are bad. No, keep them here. They'll abandon you. So I also want people to have choice and options and agency, because they are the one in charge of their stories and narrative, despite the systems that we live in.
Thank you. And I do want to open up the floor for everyone else now. So if anybody has questions for Canhs, kind of based off this conversation, feel free to either put it in the chat or also unmute yourself and ask a question.
Is it all right if I go first?
Yes, definitely.
Canhs, I really appreciate the time. I think there are a lot of things that you said that resonated well with me, and also the humor too. I think you present things in a way that makes a difficult subject a little lighter, which is nice. My question is around, I personally, I think the curiosity thing has led me in a lot of directions. That's been helpful, as well as to leading me here, which is also helpful. My question's more around how I can work on sharing this with some more of my friends as well as my family, because I think it took me a while. I felt like I had all the answers and that I was functioning very well and I was doing fine without any personal work, which I've learned in the last 3, 4, 5 years is not true. But I don't know how necessarily to help spark that same curiosity for other people. And it's something that I think about a lot for my younger brother, but also just for my friends and the people that I'm close to.
Okay. Can you ask me that question again in like one sentence?
Yeah. so the question boils down to is how do I encourage or help get people rolling down a path that I feel like I've been lucky to go down myself.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about systems and families and roles. Okay. Ideally, you would be able to encourage them. But what I've also learned, being a therapist, doing this work, being a brother, a partner, all that stuff, is that everyone is on their own journey. And sometimes, not all the time, you might have to leave people there and meet them where they're at and come back later. Who you're seeing now is not who I was even 3 years ago. My clients can tell you that. So I'm sharing this with you because I wasn't even having this conversation before I went to grad school. I was that sort of Southeast Asian person that was like, yeah, everything's like, it's all fine. Like, I'm not racist. Blah, blah, like, well, I'm gay, I'm oppressed, right? So I would say you can try and have space and talk to them, but sometimes people might not be ready. And what you can offer them, which is what I offer my clients, is presence. Presence is sitting still and being okay when things are shaking. Yeah, I hear you. Hasn't sunken in yet. It's like that planting a seed thing. Got it. Not a fan. You don't agree with them. That's okay. Can we agree to disagree? Right? And also thinking about your own boundaries. There are some people I don't associate with anymore because of their beliefs and that it harms. Some of the things don't even harm me, but I also realize I don't have to be harmed by policies or systems in order to leave a relationship. I obviously talk about it, right? Like, I'm not a woman, but if you say some crazy shit about, like, a woman's right to choose, I'm like, boo, you gotta go. I don't talk like that. Well, I do, but I'm just like, this ain't working for me, because it doesn't have to harm me for me to have empathy or validation. I'm not gonna agree with you. What are your thoughts on that? I'm more directive as a therapist, as you can tell, so you ain't gonna get the Freudian nodding sort of thing. So you can disagree with me.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's hard in general to change people's minds, period, or to influence them in a direction that they're not already going in. I think it's just, I think about it deeply with people I'm very close to already, because I care about them, right? And I want them to have the opportunity to be more at peace, like you're saying. And it's hard because they have to be open to putting in the work themselves as well.
Okay, so I'll ask you this as a therapeutic question, not therapy, disclaimer, okay? Recording. This is a curious question I ask myself with my clients. Is your wish, your desire, your craving for connection with your friends, is that for you to want them to change, or is that for you? And what's your relationship to discomfort of other people not being where you're at? And you just sit with these questions, you don't answer them. So this is somatic therapy. I really want to, yeah, you got to get it. I got it. I hear you. Yeah, something is happening right now. Get comfortable. That's the mirror stuff. Get so comfortable with that. So Virginia Satir, one of my favorite family therapists, she goes, what you says come out of your mouth. Your mouth has a body. I have my own mouth, I have my own body. That's fine. Or I tell my clients, you could ask me anything you want. Doesn't mean I'll reply to it. Because if you ask me where I live or where I go to the gym, I'm not telling you that. But you can ask. You can sure ask. Go ahead. Happy holidays. So we're differentiating. I love you, but I can't be you. You love me, you can't be me. We can't force anything. Allow the other person to be them. And if it's hateful or harmful, then that's up to you. Those are your boundaries. Don't let other people judge you. Like, well, you're gonna be friends with that person? Well, then that's your journey. I'm not judging you for that. I am in a different journey. I just give less fucks. I don't have time for that shit. I've gone through so much loss and trauma in my own life. I don't have time for that. I need love in my life. I need fun in my life. So that's where I'm at. But you do what's good for you. See, how's that resonating for you, Larry?
I want to direct to
Yeah.
a question in the chat. Oh, sorry, Larry, go ahead.
No. It's a great question. It's something for sure for me to think about, and I'll definitely talk to my therapist about it. So it's definitely something to sit with and think through. But I'll recede as I've taken up plenty of time already. Thank you.
There's a question from Jonathan in the chat on thoughts on intermittent fasting. Someone recommended the practice, but flagged it for me as a trending thing that might be negatively disconnecting ourselves from our bodily needs, but I am not sure.
Again, disclaimer being recorded, I am not a dietitian or a nutritionist, so I cannot recommend, that's out of the scope of my practice. Seriously, because I don't know. I do not know about intermittent fasting. Yeah.
But yeah, that's fair. We can follow up with, we'll try and find resources for that, Jonathan. Another question for you, Canhs. Do you have a resiliency practice to build self-trust around feelings of being overwhelmed, fear, or shame?
Developing, not a yes. Developing, yeah. So I'm a very avoidant person. That's a self-disclosure. That means that I am terrified. I know everything I'm telling you is really funny, right? I'm a therapist, terrified of feelings because of how I grew up. Feelings are bad, you gotta be smart. So really I was talking about myself, perfection the whole time. Let's keep it real, okay? I'm just normalizing this for you. So I'm developing my practice to normalize and humanize emotions. Like when I cry, I'm doing better. I go, oh, I'm really sad. 3 years ago, I would have been disgusted at myself. Like, oh my God, you're crying again? Why are you crying? You're so weak. So it's developing. So I have a mindfulness practice. I learned that a lot of my trauma is stuck inside and I tend to over-explain when I get really anxious. So my practice is being more in my body, expressing my needs, identifying I have feelings and I'm not a robot. It's so new to me, and repeating. That's my practice.
Can I ask you to talk a little bit about over-explaining? I was just seeing a lot of tweets.
People love this one.
How does it manifest?
Yeah, so there's a fight, flight, freeze. People know that. Bodily responses to trauma. Fight, you want to fight, you're really angry. Some of my clients are like that. Freeze, dissociate, or flight. Gotta go, leave. People don't know about fright and fawn. Fawn is actually very common, particularly with the Southeast Asian diasporas that I work with. Fawning is appeasement, fear of conflict, fear of anything that's not comfortable. So like emotions or anger. So over-explaining can be a form of fawning or appeasement. So I'll give you an example. You did really terrible on this project. Like this is not gonna reflect well on your performance review. Right? Or it can be you're in a relationship and you're avoidant or you're anxious and something bad happened and your shame comes out and you go, oh, it's because I'm bad. I should have known that my partner wanted flower. I didn't do that and they're crying because it's my fault. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. What can I do to make it better? So you keep explaining because what's happening in your body is this. And your body's trying to regulate and there's different ways to regulate. Over-explaining is one. And then there's dissociation, which is like, So that's what over-explaining can do. It's like you keep talking, it sounds really bad. It's like you're talking, but you're not talking about anything. It's just content. There's no meaning or empathy or emotion behind it. Like da, 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 da. Like some of my clients, they'll be like, I'm fine. I don't need to see you. I'm just seeing you every week for a check-in. I'm great. They want to be my ideal client, right? I'm like, oh, they have no emotion. I'm like, are you sad? No. Person died. I'm fine. Oh, okay. Yeah.
There's a question from Carol. Canhs, you mentioned that not everyone needs therapy. How would someone know if they need therapy or just need to do the work themselves?
So this is a great question. I love this question. I work a lot with first timers as well. It depends on culture, time, place, context. So what culture are you from? So I'm Vietnamese, we don't do therapy. Like me doing this work, it's bad, it's weird, it's a mess. So Carol, I would ask you, like, what's your relationship to mental health, asking for help, therapy? or just reaching out to someone that isn't you and seeking reliance on someone, right? For me, I've been in therapy off and on since I was in college, and I've needed it at different times. So when I have gone through profound loss. So another self-disclosure, when I was 19, my entire family passed away, and I've been an orphan for 15 years now. So my mom, my dad, and my 3 brothers, and it brings me great pain, but it's on my website. My clients Google me. I've been on the Seattle Times. So I went to therapy for that moment because of my grief, but I had to wait. So this is how bad my perfection was. I had to wait until I had a panic attack. And then the therapist was like, it just sounds like you're sad that your family's gone. I'm like, no, bitch, it ain't. Like, I was so resistant. No, bitch, you don't know me. And I'm like, right. Then years later, I went to college. I moved to the South, and that was terrible, right? Like homophobia and racism. So I was like, do they hate me because I'm gay or I'm brown? Went to therapy for that. And then I got my master's in social work, and I moved from New York to Seattle. So every part of my life, there was a different therapist for a different need. So it's, again, doing that work of, Carol, can you allow yourself time to rely on someone else, right? To realize it's not a weakness, to be in relationship with someone. And that's been my own healing work as I do this work with someone else, with my clients, right? I have to practice what I preach, but my brain will tell me, no, you're fine, you're functioning. But my heart will go, go see a therapist, boo. You're a little sad right now. You're about to cry. That's not normal.
Zandy, so you can go for it.
Hey, just wanted to say thank you so much for all of this very insightful advice and wisdom. And I'm gonna volunteer to speak rather than type my question, because this is a trauma that I'm trying to slowly work with, of public speaking and always being anxious about being perfect. So I'm going to try to speak up, but with the anxiety, I've actually typed out my question. So I guess in the process of trying to reflect, in that like cleaned Windex mirror and reconnect with my own identity, I've had a lot of problems with dealing with my family, disassociating with my family, or trying to connect even deeper with my family, because on one side I understand that, they have, they support me in certain ways, they enable a certain amount of intimacy and relationship that I know is kind of like the foundation of kind of other relationships. But at the same time, and so I guess, there is a lot of joy that can be derived from being intimate with family, but at the same time, they too have dealt with like generational trauma and scarcity. And so there has been a certain value system that's been created and perpetuated in my family from my grandmother's generation through to my parents' generation, and now down to me. So I guess, how do you, and I think that value system to a certain extent has kind of disenfranchised me from my ability to have a meaningful relationship with myself. So just kind of out of curiosity, how would you deal with like, I think on one side it's like, I know that they are where they are and I can't necessarily change them, but then how do I deal with family that has dealt with generational trauma, and how do I deal with the complexity of myself in relationship to myself and my identity in relationship to my family's identity?
That's a really great question, and I could spend an hour doing that, explaining it. First, I would say go inside. And one of the first things that clients always find helpful, even in my own journey, is having a language for what you're going through. So don't use intergenerational trauma, right? When I first learned about my own experiences in my own family, it's like something is happening here that doesn't feel good, and it's being passed down, and I'm fearful of inhabiting it. So take it out of your mind. This is real. Like, I believe you, right? Your experience is real and tangible. You don't have to explain it to me. So educating yourself on that and getting to that place. And then 2, if you want to go to therapy, you could do that. Read some books, but the biggest thing is for you to be more safe as much as you can in your body when you're around your family. They call this differentiating, right? Because a lot of, especially for people of color, family is so important. So we see my mom is me, my dad is me, we're all collective. So if you can feel more at home in yourself and say, this doesn't feel good, I'm gonna have to go. I'll be back, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. That will be one way, right? It's not ideal for you to kind of take agency and space towards that. So I always tell clients, like, again, you have power. Like, you could do this right now and close the screen. You have feet, you could walk away, you could mute, you could turn off the screen, right? So these are things that you can do by yourself, is learn to differentiate, like, that's my family. I'm me. And sometimes this is what intergenerational trauma does. Oh my gosh, that's me. Oh my God, that's my dad. Oh my God, we're all together. Oh my God, this is a man. We're just learning to parse out, unpack, and make space for you so that you don't get lost in your family. Because right now it's like this, right? That's what my clients tell me. I'm around my family and I don't know who I am, and like all these boundaries. So start working on yourself and figuring out, oh, it's okay to feel frustrated and to go away. Again, Zandy, I'm making this sound really easy. It's not. I've had to practice this for, I'm 34 now. I still have to practice this as a 34-year-old, right? And my clients come see me and I'm in my own therapy. So obviously it's not about perfection. It's about progress.
I think we have time for just one last question. From Jessica Khan, you mentioned guiding people towards religious practices as somewhere to self-reflect, but so much systemic oppression stems from religion. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I brought up religion because for some people who don't have religious trauma, that's a source of their resiliency. So I do religious trauma-based therapy. I don't do the conversion. I don't do any of that. I grew up really Roman Catholic. Like, I was supposed to be a priest. That's how. I'm not that Catholic anymore. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I would never, ever, ever tell a client to go pray if they're like atheist or any of that. I don't do any of that. But if they are religious, I would explore that and suggest it to them. But I do have clients where they don't play with religion anymore. And we talk about how that religion actually caused trauma for them. That's a great question. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Khan, so much for being here. If you have additional questions, feel free to pass them along to us and we'll get it over to Khan. I'm also going to just pop in some links so that you can keep following him. Here is Khan's LinkedIn, as well as Liberation Feeling Seattle. Oops, sorry, I sent that privately to someone instead of everyone. Here you are. So with that, Khan, if you have any last words, feel free to tell everyone. Otherwise, we will move into the second part of this, which is small group breakout room.
Yeah, I would love to just do a little bit of woo affirmations, because our nervous system, right? We're talking about really, and I self-disclose some big stuff. So like, if you want, you can turn it off and roll your eyes if this is too woo for you to kind of go into the next place. I'm gonna give you some, I call them my wounded healer wisdom, some of the things that I've learned. And I say this to my clients all the time. So you can close your eyes, turn off your screen, take a breath. I'm just gonna say this to you, and I want your only job is to figure out, how does this feel and land for you as I'm saying these things to you? So let me find them. All right, so I'm gonna look at the screen, but you can turn off your screen if you want to, if it's too weird. So you are enough, you are smart enough, you are worthy enough, you are good enough, you are enough in this very moment. You don't need permission to heal, though validation is nice. You do not need permission to heal from me, from your therapist, your parents, no one. You are so important. Your stories matter. Your heart matters. Your bodies matter. You're not crazy or flawed. Reframe this. You are traumatized and you're healing. You're healing. You are not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. You always have power and agency and choice, even when it doesn't feel like you do under pressure. You can always say no. Relationships are where we hurt, fear, and disconnect, and relationships can be where we heal, connect, and love. Relationships don't always hurt. Boundaries are non-negotiable and mandatory. You have a right to boundaries, to say no. You have a right. You deserve boundaries. Strive to live as simply as possible. Simplify your job, simplify your communication, simplify your relationships, simplify yourself. Don't make it so complicated. Stop using big words. Go to your heart. Healing from the inside out is painful, humiliating, and terrifying. And what's on the other side is beauty, peace, and freedom. Perfection is so exhausting and it doesn't exist. Stop trying to be perfect. I'm gonna say this again. Perfection is exhausting and is a myth. It doesn't exist. Stop trying to be perfect. It doesn't exist. Rest, relax, and nourish your mind, body, soul, and spirit. You deserve to heal. And then the last one, stop, take a deep breath, slow down, and enjoy the patience. The journey is the destination. And then one last one, you are enough. You are good. You are loved. You are worthy. You are enough. And when you open your eyes, take as long as you need. Don't look at the screen. Just bring yourself back to this moment. Find something you can touch. Something you see. Look at the shades of green or the colors or the sound of my voice. And I bet you that you had a reaction in your body from hearing those words. And we don't hear these words very often in our day-to-day life. This is what decolonized healing is.
Thank you
It feels
so
good.
much.
I haven't met anyone, but it feels so peaceful now. Sorry, I just disrupted the peace.
I'm gonna stop